everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Fix the Front End, How Financial Services Can Eliminate Data Chaos at Source. Today, we're going to be looking at some of the critical challenges facing financial services companies when it comes to data collection and how to solve them. My name is Ella Wilkinson, and I am on hosting duties today. I'm also the broadcast editor of Fintech magazine. I'm joined by David Scavetta, Director of Security and Compliance at FormAssembly, and Rory Galvin, Founder and CEO at Neverium. We'll be tackling some of the biggest hurdles in financial services, and our agenda today will cover data collection challenges in FinServ, fixing workflow and integration chaos, security and compliance at intake layer, and then we will look at some real-world use case examples, and finally wrap up with a Q&A. We've got a lot to cover today, so let's crack on. Can I get you first, please, David and Rory, to introduce yourselves and your respective companies? If we kick off with you, David.
Sure, sounds good. Appreciate the introduction. I'm David Scavetta. I've been with FormAssembly for about 3 years. I've been in the information security space for almost 20 now. Keeping good quality data is kind of near and dear to my heart, so I'm happy to be talking about this.
Perfect. What about you, Rory?
Thanks, Ella. Rory Galvin, so founder of Neverium. We are a digital transformation consultancy for the financial services industry. So we work at banks, insurance, wealth managers across primarily North America to help them align technology with their business goals. So company is now approaching 6 years old. So looking forward to the conversation today.
Brilliant. And yeah, like I said, we've got so much to cover, so let's get on with it. Our first discussion today is going to be around the core challenges of data security and data collection. So I know you guys have some slides. If you'd like to kick us off, please, David.
Yeah, thank you. So first thing, I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the general challenges that I've seen in my experience with data collection, particularly for FinServ, Fintech, and companies orienting around the financial services space. A lot of especially the front-end systems, connecting clean data pathways between those systems and back-end systems where data processing actually happens is really, really important. And there are a number of challenges that any organization can run into, big or small. You have small, inefficient silos and workflows. You have manual processes. You have integrations that are maybe limited in how they operate. So, for example, if you are working with an integration provider to pass data back and forth, and let's say one of the connection breaks, or maybe an ingest didn't complete correctly, how do you find out about that? How do you know about that? How do you correct it? How do you prevent something like that from happening in the first place? And I've seen in my career a number of different compliance areas where data coming in, that data being omitting fields, some fields being wrong, data being dropped can be extremely impactful when you're running compliance programs on the back end. So from a finance perspective, I'm thinking things like the GLBA safeguards rule, KYC, AML, where getting complete and accurate data for some of the analysis that needs to happen on the back end is especially prevalent.
Rory, what about from your perspective?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think this is like, these challenges have been around for, a long time. They persist. And I think it's like one of the top challenges that we face with a lot of our projects is that like it's with a lot of these projects, it's really, data is the fuel for these systems. So, getting the data right builds confidence in the systems. It drives adoption. The accuracy of, business processes and calculations are all hinge on that. So it's extremely important. And, there isn't a single project that we do that doesn't have these challenges and that we need to overcome.
So, I mean, dirty data there is really, really quite important. So just tell me what dirty data is and how that becomes an issue.
Well, I mean, it can come from many. I mean, there's many examples. It would be sort of incomplete data. It would be data that's been migrated from one system to another that's in a different format, duplicate data, corrupt data, really, different characters, different character sets, different standards, certain, integrations between systems in the financial world where there's a large volume of data passed back and forth, like in banks, it can become corrupted. So I mean that I mean it's a widespread spread thing, but it really comes down to how complete the data is in the system, how accurate it is, and how well perceived it is by the user.
So in Salesforce integration, then how can that result in dirty data?
Um, well, it could be a case that you're moving on to Salesforce from an old system, a legacy CRM or a spreadsheet or something like that, and the data comes across in a format that that is not good. It needs to be fixed up. It needs to be cleansed. It needs to be improved. It could be that you have like integrations with websites and other systems. You've got like a lot of duplicate data coming in that needs to be merged together. So those would be typical examples of it. There's, other things around perhaps, languages and translation as well is another thing that we sometimes see. But really, it shows up, on migrations, integrations, and generally at the start of a digital transformation project, you'll see a lot of it, and then there's triage processes in place to deal with it over time to make sure that it's dealt with as when the system is live.
And David, I guess from a security standpoint, how does dirty data actually risk a company? How does it leave you open to exposure risks?
So at the end of the day, most companies are generally on the hook for the data they're processing and kind of whatever checks and balances they need to provide on their back end. So if we're thinking about KYC, if an organization rather is operating from an incomplete data set, some data gets dropped, some data gets changed. As Rory mentioned, even things like localization, if you're talking about someone's name, where, again, using KYC, for example, an organization is responsible for cultivating that data and investigating well enough to make judgment calls on appropriate customer permissions and entitlements. Having clean data sets is absolutely prevalent. And it can sometimes be a journey, especially as Rory mentioned, if you're migrating from an older instance of Salesforce or another data collector or just manual spreadsheets that maybe a team has been using for the longest time. But companies grow and scale, and that scaling with spreadsheets can be tough.
Brilliant. So should we move on to fixing that chaos then and take each of these problems one by one? So Rory, how are we combating error-prone processes and swapping out manual processes to save not only time but also money?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think how are we doing it? We kind of do it in a lot of ways, certainly at Navirum. But I think like really the first thing is to understand like, what are the goals for, the process that we're trying to automate? Like, what's the purpose of it? And then we can work back into defining that process and then looking at ways to automate that process. So, that can have, there's various different levels of automation that we can have. But at the heart of it is data. If you think about straight through processing in a lot of banks, when it comes to transactions and data is being passed between multiple systems, data integrity is key. Now that is sort of at the Formula One high performance level of data processes, but it could be just in a wealth management practice or something like that, where they're trying to onboard a new client faster to save time and money. So really just ensuring that the data quality is good, the team are confident in it, and that it's secure as part of the automation of that process is really important. So it starts with defining the process and then understanding where the data challenges are and then addressing those individually.
And David?
Yeah, it really comes down to uh, at the, I guess, at the ingest layer where you actually start collecting that data. Um, the more work that an organization, well, I shouldn't say work, but the cleaner that data is actually ingested at the start point of the workflow, and then can kind of proceed into the backend systems, again, using Salesforce as an example, really kind of ensures that they're operating from, let me rephrase, all the, I guess, failure points where data could, let's say, go dirty, are kind of addressed because you're exchanging manual processes and maybe multiple intake layers for a kind of a very clean funnel. So clean data in, clean data out, or at least that's how I look at it.
So yeah, you kind of mentioned the dirty pipeline there. I'm interested by that phrase. How would you clean out a dirty pipeline? And what does that mean to you?
Well, I guess using the funnel analogy again, I would start looking at all the initial ingest points. What data are you collecting, from whom you're collecting it, and kind of how you cultivate that all together. Right now, who collects that? Where does it go? Does it go in a spreadsheet? And I think that once you get to those different intake points and those potentially manual processes, is where companies get into trouble with like dirty data, because generally a lot of the security and compliance standards start being applied once you collect that data, and then further on where that gets passed through. So I would really kind of map it out, have like an inventory of all your ingest points. What are you collecting? Where are you collecting it from? And then where does it go from there? And getting a real understanding of kind of where the security and compliance factors weigh in and where a company has reliance on clean data. And then you can kind of almost go backwards to kind of see how it should look. So if your ultimate destination system is Salesforce, for example, great. Then you kind of work backwards. What systems are receiving that data, ingesting into Salesforce? What processes are outside of that? And you kind of start cleaning it up little by little. And then I would say an ideal funnel kind of has as few or maybe only one intake uh, for collecting that data in the first place. And then it's much easier to kind of configure and fine tune that ingest to then later send the data wherever you have to.
Yeah, I think I definitely add to that. Like I think like having control of the data as it comes into the system is really the key there. Like at the form level, and limiting the options for the user to drop down lists and buttons and options for them, and removing as much free text as possible, I think is a big help, and that just allows the form and the process to map into the data model inside of the source system. We're talking about Salesforce here, but it could be something else. Really can help maintain the quality of the data over time.
I guess just one thing that I've kind of seen in my career is that most mistakes from a security and compliance angle tend to happen from small mistakes, typos, things not being recorded right. Um, so as Rory mentioned, the more of those you kind of avoid and kind of force the process into adopting like clean data fields and things like that, it becomes easier to maintain across the board.
Brilliant. Yes, that brings us on to workflows and integration chaos. So how are you using deep force sales integrations to clean out that dirty data? I guess this is more aimed at you, Rory.
How do we deal with this? Well, I think when it comes to, I mean, there's a few parts to this question here, but like, I mean, there's the data level, ensuring that that gets into the system consistently and accurately, and in a way that like can be measured and stuff like that over time. And then there's like the security and the compliance part, where ensuring that the data is secure, it's encrypted, that it's not vulnerable to some sort of nefarious attack or something like that on its journey between the form into Salesforce is really, really important. And that's certainly something that our clients look for all the time, especially in regulated industries like financial services. You're dealing with personal data, so it's something that we have to guarantee as part of the service. And again, there's a lot of options out there for moving data between across processes and into systems and stuff like that. But our clients are always looking for the ones that are the most secure, and that give them that peace of mind, but also comply with the local regulations in the industry as well. So again, that's one of the reasons that we work with Form Assembly, is to guarantee that. And really, as a company and as a consultancy, we're focused on the efficiency that the process and the solution will give the client, but also that security and compliance element of it. Probably leave it to David to dive into exactly the details of what that is in terms of how that's done in the system. But in the context of this conversation, like a lot of that security is there out of the box with when we set up something like Form Assembly and we integrate it. We don't have to worry about that part of it really as much. We can focus on the client and building the efficiency into the solution we're building, which is a great thing for us, as a consulting company. So, but there's just a little bit of perspective there from my side.
Yeah, and just to, I guess, chime in on that, if we're focusing in on data integrity and the completeness and accuracy of data throughout the pipeline, a lot of the security controls that we're talking about here have the added benefit of ensuring that data integrity as it goes from one system to another and as it resides within one system. So if you traditionally think about things like access control, single sign-on, SAML, you think like encryption, in transit encryption at rest, audit logs. The lens at which people generally think about these things are through traditional security, making sure that data doesn't get out. But they're equally beneficial if you just want to ensure that the data kind of retains as is, and it is untampered, I guess one might say. So aside from the traditional security values, it definitely is an enormous benefit in maintaining the completeness and accuracy of that data you're collecting.
So how are you actually ensuring the security and the security and the completeness of that data when you take it on your forms?
Well, I guess on our end, here at Form Assembly, we have a variety of compliance programs that kind of establish a pretty strong foundation and a baseline for us. So these would be ISO 27001, SOC 2, and similar standards like that. And they keep us in practice of maintaining and operating controls that ensure how our products and how our technologies and how our people operate on a day-to-day basis. We also work pretty closely with our product and engineering teams to ensure that security is kind of a baked-in part of the product, and that it's kind of easy for customers to be secure on their end, to implement secure fields, and that we're able to kind of guide them towards the best pathways to collect that data in a way that maintains its structure and allows it to be passed on to one system or another in a pretty clean and orderly fashion.
Fabulous. I see you nodding away there, Rory. Do you have anything to add?
I don't think really like I think that the main thing is that when you partner with a company like Form Assembly and indeed like other like Salesforce, that they're constantly keeping the standards up to date for how they, process that data in terms of compliance and security. And that's really important because the landscape is constantly shifting all the time. Especially like this year, there's like, been a big upsurge in cybersecurity issues and stuff like that, with so much happening with AI and the power of computers now. That really this has to constantly evolve. And again, like as part of the model with Form Assembly or with Salesforce, that like the client is getting these upgrades as part of the deal, which so they can check in and see that, whether it's even something as simple as two-factor authentication or stronger passwords or higher levels of encryption, that those improvements are coming out all the time. So, the client ultimately gets the benefit of that, which is the main thing.
Brilliant. Should we move on to some real world successes?
Mm-hmm.
Brilliant. So, Rory, over to you.
Yeah, so we've a client called One Wealth, which so they're a wealth management company, and they recently implemented Form Assembly to help with some of their internal processes with client onboarding to drive efficiency, improve the advisor experience, the client experience. And during the evaluation, they looked at several options to do this, and they, chose to go with Form Assembly in the well. There was a strong field of competition, but really it came down to the value the solution could deliver. As well as the look and feel and the ease of use of the system as well is really important, as well as compliance and security. So. And this is a pattern that we've seen with other clients in the past as well, that they've looked at other solutions that are out there only to choose Form Assembly, because when it comes down to the security and compliance side of things, it's it's a leader in that space, and it's very adaptable to a lot of these processes, and helping to eliminate data quality issues and several other factors in doing that. So they recently completed that project in September, in fact, and so they're happy to act as a reference for this session, which is good. That's One Wealth, and they're based in San Francisco there. So we'll happy to go into that in more detail if anybody's interested.
Absolutely. I'm happy for you to go into that in more detail.
Oh, yeah, 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 me. Well, I mean I mean, I think that like they in terms of their journey, like they probably in the context of data, migrated from one system to Salesforce. They had a bunch of data issues which we resolved and went through, and then the next, they've been on this digital journey. The next part of that journey, the CRM, that financial services cloud that is suited to their industry. And the next gradual step was to look at how they automate the client journey. They very well thought out client onboarding process, complicated, not complicated, detailed, which we transitioned into Form Assembly and Salesforce. So, that involved integrating both systems, getting the data models right, and making sure that the team were happy to use the system, and so were their clients. So it's a lot of testing, and the design of the solution was important. But Form Assembly have been a great partner through that. So so in that respect, the project went well, and One Wealth are happy with the solution.
What would you say to other companies that wanted to use Form Assembly? How would, yeah.
Yeah, I would say that like I think that like how to use it really is to look at any process that is has the potential to be automated, both client facing and perhaps like internally as well, where they need other teams to put data into a form or collect data and process it. So starting off with a sort of a business case is really important, and a like an efficiency that you're trying to gain, and then sort of in terms of form assembly itself, I think a great way to start with it is like just a proof of concept, just to see what it looks like, because it's quite easier, you start off with a demo even and see how it looks and mock up like what the process looks like, what the form looks like, and generally sort of take things from there and just sort of iterate and adapt until you have a solution that works. And I think what we see with form assembly is that once people actually interact with the product itself and they see their company branded and they see all the feels, it has a strong impact in terms of like the visual appeal, and also the fact that it's so customizable around what they need. So while you're going through all of this, you're focused on the solution. You're not caught up in the compliance or security side of things. That's just built into the platform, which is great. So for anybody who is, considering, something like this, like form assembly, a solution, we'd be happy to take them through a proof of concept and see how it goes, help them map out their processes and see if they can transition those into form assembly or not.
Brilliant. David, do you have anything to add on this point? Any success stories of your own?
So for the first almost 7, 8 years of my career, I worked in financial services, and I can say that I have ran into this issue where we had some process or function that was reliant either on spreadsheets and manual processes or antiquated systems, both of which were problematic in terms of handling the data in the systems. And really, it comes down to it's not so much the data itself being bad that's a problem. I mean, obviously it is, but the what do you do about it then? That also becomes a problem, because if you need to reconcile data between a spreadsheet or maybe an older antiquated system and something newer like Salesforce or whatever the two systems are, reconciling that can often be tedious and painful and difficult. And if you need to correct data, you often need to go back to the source, and that can also be kind of problematic.
Brilliant. So we actually have some pre-submitted Q&A questions for you guys if you're happy to take some. So first, I guess we'll go with, how much time would you estimate is actually lost time-consuming corrections resulting from bad data or dirty data, as we've been calling it?
No, I can jump on that one, actually, because I feel it lines up with actually what I was just referring to. Going back to the example where we're talking about reconciling data between two or more systems, or we are correcting data that we ingested or passed on somehow, I would say there's like a 10 to 20x improvement in time saved when you have automated pipelines and clean ingest and data integrations and things like that. Really for the reasons that there is less reliance on reconciliation between different systems. There's less review and checks and balances that need to be done to compensate for manual processes. And there's less work that goes into, if you have identified, let's say, any dirty data, what a company would need to go through to actually correct that, and then how to avoid that kind of moving forward.
So this next question actually goes on very well from that, but it's more on the security side of it. How does utilizing a no-code tool like form assembly for building data collection forms enable business teams to be more agile while also ensuring compliance and security?
Well, purely from a security and compliance perspective, it really goes back to some of the things I mentioned earlier about the application of security controls as being additional safeguards to protect data integrity throughout the data lifecycle. Form assembly being a bit of a, I would argue, easier system to work with. Of course, I work here, so I'm happy to say that. But in any case, it makes it easier for end users who are actually responsible for the data, and they're in charge of running programs or collecting data, putting reports together, whatever the case may be. It empowers them to actually collect data and then make sure that it's ingested and parsed correctly according to the forms that they themselves build. And that can be helped by actually constructing like different field types. What kind of data are you collecting? Where do you put it? We're talking about workflows, having different orchestration layers, but it really can help that end user look at kind of a complete data set right at the ingest layer before it even goes on to anything else, and just ensure that the data itself is not only accurate, but it's structured. It really tells a complete story, and that we're kind of narrowing any points of potential failure where even something like collecting phone numbers and things like that. You have different countries that collect with parentheses, without parentheses, et cetera. So the more you're able to standardize that ingest, the easier it is. It should be for that end user responsible for those programs. And Rory, I'll pass it to you if you had anything additional to tack on to that.
Yeah, well, I think like I think the, any of these projects, like it helps to have a good design at the start, and I think that like where companies can get off to the best beginning on any of these projects is just to look at is to map out the data models between the form and their current system, and to make sure that they all line up in terms of the fields and the data that you're capturing and the languages and the types of information that you're entering into those all matches up. And then like form assembly is like it's a low code solution, so like it's not like we're getting in and building the thing from scratch or anything. So we can focus then on the efficiency of the process more, making sure that things go, the user experience, the client experience. But I think getting the process right, getting the data model right, and as I mentioned at the beginning of this, like focusing on the goal of the solution as well. As in some cases, like the efficiency might be a key thing that we're trying, or improving data quality might be, a key business goal. But another key business goal could be just delivering a great client experience, like to be more professional in the way that you're collecting information, or it could be to be compliant. It could be like that the actual efficiency that the system is delivering is not huge, but it's much more secure, and that a fine from the regulator or is going to be or some sort of legal costs are going to be far higher as a result of not implementing it. So I think you have to just consider all of those things, in terms of the bigger picture, and then sort of zoom in on what the solution is.
So we actually have a question here about compliance. And it says, in the current regulatory environment, what is the biggest compliance risk that financial services companies face by continuing to use outdated tools for data collection? And how does centralizing data intake with modern compliant tools specifically address that risk? Sorry, there's a lot of elements to that question.
Sure. No, I'm happy to tackle that one. So if I had to characterize the biggest compliance risk specifically as a kind of a theme, I would say reliance on data with maybe questionable ingest pathways, because ultimately companies, groups, and people are kind of accountable for how that data supports whatever processes and programs that's reliant on it. So if you're thinking something like client data intake or KYC or anything like that, and groups and teams are operating from incomplete data sets, or maybe the data sets had some field mismatches, even something like a few characters being off, and that data then being used to make maybe financial scoring determinations or appropriate customer base determinations, or maybe it's feeding some other financial systems, books and records, who knows? Small gaps in data at that layer can be extremely problematic. And then let's say, should something like that happen, those teams then need to kind of work backwards to say, okay, we had this process that was built on a manual spreadsheet. Where did kind of the data go wrong? How do we correct that? And need to, I would say, depending on what kind of event and what kind of reliance they have, maybe there's a deeper investigation that needs to happen at that point. Like, okay, someone's name or other identifying fields wasn't correct when we first ingested and operated on that. Knowing that now, how do we make sure we didn't kind of do anything wrong on our end? That's one scenario. The other scenario could be fines, penalties, corrective actions, things like that. Organizations like the FTC are pressing companies across the board, not just financial services, to keep clean and accurate data. And a lot of the security controls certainly help with this. So even if you think things like access control, single sign-on, they help to avoid the scenario of bad actors coming in and accessing that data. And then, if a bad actor were to come in and, let's say, delete just a chunk of data, that's still pretty impactful, even if it doesn't conform to a breach per se. So a lot of those things kind of weigh in on from different angles.
So, Rory, I guess from a user case, how do outdated tools, cause that data chaos?
Probably, I think just to kind of go back to the compliance question there, like, and, I'll bring that into the data chaos thing, is that, like, certainly in regulated industries, financial industries, they have regulations they have to comply with at different frequencies, like every year. So, they have to do things like, KYC, anti-money laundering, they have to do KYC refreshes, they have to do suitability testing. So all these sorts of things, and the list goes on. These processes have to be completed for every client, and they have to do it in an efficient way that allows their business to be, to run and be profitable and not to be too onerous. So, solutions like Form Assembly really help to comply with those processes, which is the first thing. But they also, when you're going through one of those regulatory processes, you have to make sure that your data is accurate and correct, and that personal data is protected, and that, like, there's the regulations, and then there's the compliance part of it, like around data residency, where the data is kept, and all that sort of stuff. So, companies like Salesforce and Form Assembly really help with that whole process, and it's, very much tied to the values of these companies. But, like, I think at the end of the day, Form Assembly just helps to bring the data through the process in a consistent way, and it limits the data vulnerability opportunities, or data, I just, making the data bad or dirty, whatever you want to describe it, like, it just really helps, reduce that possibility. So that's why in our, from what we see, like, a lot of our clients choose to go with it.
Brilliant. I guess the final question from me then is there anything else that either of you would like to add? Is there any burning issues that you want to talk about?
Not so much a burning issue, but I would just point out, anyone curious about Form Assembly's security apparatus and programs that we operate, we do have a trust center that's available. It's just security.formassembly.com. You can learn a little more about more of kind of the proof being in the pudding, shall we say.
Yeah, and I'd also add that, like, I think a lot of the things perhaps we discussed today, they could be quite big processes people are trying to automate, or do so in a more efficient way and preserving the data quality. But a lot of the use cases we see with form assembly are could be quite small, like could be quite like 2 or 3 step processes that are automated or are pushed into this solution, and people might be using a spreadsheet for it or email for it, or it could even be paper based in some cases. Like, so I think like the beauty of form assembly is that it can be used across a range of processes in a company to automate and to do more efficiently. So, to really anybody out there, if there's something that is kind of frustrating, or a vulnerability for a company that could be done in a more secure and automated way, I think as well as the bigger compliance type onboarding and KYC type processes, it can also be used for a lot of the more minor ones as well.
Well, I'm afraid that is all we have time for today. If you would like to learn more about Form Assembly or have any further questions inspired from this webinar, please pop them in the chat and a member of the Form Assembly team will get back to you. This webinar will be available online shortly, so please share with your colleagues and your peers. A massive thank you to our panelists, David and Rory. Thank you so much for joining us today. It has been a pleasure speaking with you, and thank you all for joining us. Bye-bye for now.